A big hello and a very warm welcome to Brand Equity with me, Sonali Krishna. Today, we're going to be talking about the much discussed Open Network for Digital Commerce known as ONDC. Now, for the uninitiated, ONDC is a government initiative aiming at promoting open networks for all aspects of exchange of goods and services over digital or electronic networks. The Open Network for Digital Commerce aims to break the platform-centric structure of e-commerce to establish a model that creates a more level playing field for even the small merchants, hence spurring competition in the space. Well, to understand this open network and its impact on the ecosystem as well as consumers like you and I'm joined by Shireesh Joshi, the Chief Business Officer of ONDC. Thank you so much, Shirish. Truly a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, I've tried to briefly introduce the subject and, what ONDC is to my viewers, but I'd like you to dumb it down and break it down for the viewers to understand what exactly is ONDC and how is it going to benefit all parties.
Sure. The first thing I will say is it takes a bit of pondering over to understand because we are so used to e-commerce acting in a certain way, behaving in a certain way, and the experience in a certain way. And this is very, very different. And some of the rules are going to change completely. They're very, very different. So to truly appreciate takes a little bit of effort. And so I'd ask your audience to be a little bit patient with themselves as they dive into it. Now, at the heart of it, let me first talk about the purpose. The purpose of ONDC is to achieve population scale participation in e-commerce. What we have achieved, let's say with biometric identity through Aadhaar, or what we've achieved digital payments through UPI, where just about everybody has an Aadhaar, or just about everybody can do a UPI payment. That's the goal of ONDC, that just about everybody, in fact, everybody, why just about everybody? Everybody should be able to buy or sell on whichever application, as long as it is ONDC enabled. So that's the goal. Now, how we get to that goal is a little bit different from how we get to e-commerce today. Today, e-commerce requires the buyer and the seller to be on the same app, on the same platform. And only when they're on the same platform can there be a transaction. And if you have to access a seller which is on another platform, not on the platform you're on, then you as a buyer have to go and register on that other platform as a buyer, and then in that other platform you'll have to do the transaction. And we sort of take this for granted that that's how e-commerce is. People are on different platforms, sellers are on different platforms, that's where transaction will take place. Now we are used to many universes that we participate in today that are interoperable, that are not closed systems. Let's take banking, for example. So, Sonali, if I have to send you money, I don't even need to know which your bank is. If I have your mobile number, I can send it to you here. So you and I can have completely different banks. We can have completely different apps, but I can send you money. Both of us don't need to be in the same bank or in the same app. Or let's take telecom services. You could be with a different telecom provider. I could be with a different telecom provider, but I can call you. I don't need a SIM card of the same telecom provider that you have to be able to call me. So in so many of our day-to-day lives, we are actually perfectly normal with interoperable words. When you and I exchange email, you and I will not be the same email client. We won't even have the same internet service provider, but we can send an email to each other. So many parts of our lives are interoperable, and they always have been, and we just take it for granted that they're interoperable. And in the same fashion, e-commerce has never been interoperable. It requires both parties to be in the same platform, and we take that also for granted, that that's how it has to be. And that's what's going to change. And the way it is going to change is ONDC is now saying that no one party needs to put together the entire end-to-end value chain. So there are buyer-side services. The buyer has to search for product, add to cart, make the payment, receive tracking information. That's the buyer-side services. Somebody could provide just that. Somebody else can provide seller-side services. So you have a catalog, you have an inventory that gets digitized. It's able to understand an order when it comes and able to respond to it. So those are seller-side services that somebody else can perform. Once there is an order, the delivery can be performed by a third party. So different parties can come together and complete this value chain. So you don't need one entity to do all the parts. Now, this might sound like a simple splitting of hairs, but actually it isn't, because the moment you do this change, it actually unleashes tremendous amount of power. Because now what it means is that to become part of e-commerce, you can be just a small component of that whole system and still become a part. So if I have, let's say, a group of people, let's say my batchmates, right? I have 300 batchmates. I can create a buyer application with my 300 batchmates. I can connect them to the ONDC network through my application, and they will be able to see all the sellers that are present there. Likewise, Sonali could do the same with her batchmates. And so different people can pull in their buyer pools onto the network. Similarly, different people can pull in their different seller pools to the network. So in the end, all sellers and all buyers are on one single network. And it doesn't matter which application they're on. Just the way it doesn't matter which email software I'm using or which payment software I'm using for UPI. So that's the freedom that will get created. And this freedom will allow lots of entities to pull in their buyers and sellers and build this near universal network where everybody can transact. That's the heart of the idea.
Okay, so given what you've just told me, let me understand. Let's assume your network is up and running.
Right.
Does it mean that do I need to have an app? Do I have to have an account with ONDC? How do I transact?
Great question. So you will not directly interact with ONDC. Just the way on the internet you don't directly interact with HTTP. HTTP is a protocol your browser uses, and HTTP is a protocol that websites use. But because the protocol is common, every web browser sees every website. So you will have an app, and it could be one of the apps that you already have on your phone today. So one of your payment, or more than one of your payment applications on your phone today, tomorrow could become an ONDC shopping app. Some of the messaging applications we have today, where you message your friends and family and colleagues, any one of those messaging applications could become a shopping app. The bank application on which you do your accounting today and your transaction with your bank, that application could become a shopping app. So any one of these applications that has Sonali as a customer today, if they adopt the ONDC protocol, will become a buying application for you. What that means is that they become like a concierge. What happens when you go to a hotel? You tell the concierge, I want to buy some local product, I want to eat in a local restaurant, and I want a taxi. Now, the concierge does not run the taxi services, the concierge does not run restaurants, and the concierge does not make handicrafts. But as your agent, he's able to find all three. So that's what a buyer application will do. So any one of these applications, they will be able to take Sonali's input, broadcast it to the ONDC network, where many other parties have brought sellers, look for all the items Sonali is searching for, bring them back, and the same application will present it to Sonali saying, hey, Sonali, you can choose from this. That's how it will work. So it will not require a special application. Any one of your existing applications could become an ONDC application, or all of them could become, in which case you have a choice.
Okay, so I have a few questions. Let's take, for example, how all of us transact today via e-commerce, whether it's a Swiggy or it's a Amazon or a Flipkart or whatever it is. As a customer today, if I transact on Amazon and buy something, right, I know that Amazon is responsible for delivering it to me, and Amazon is my go-to person or go-to company if I have any grievance, and they will sort it out for me. Whether it be Swiggy or it be Dunzo or it be any of or Urban Clap or whatever you may have. I know that that particular app I'm using is responsible for that transaction, and they will address my grievance. In your structure, you're saying there need not be anybody who has all capabilities, and they will use the capabilities that the platform people have come on. So basically, logistics can be handled by somebody else completely. But who takes final accountability?
So in any transaction, in all the examples you also cited, a buyer holds the entity they are interacting with directly responsible. So if I'm buying on a marketplace as a buyer, I will hold the marketplace responsible because that's the entity I'm interacting with. On ONDC, that's the buyer application. So as a buyer, I will interact with the buyer application. If I have any issue, I will raise it with the buyer application. Now, let's take the existing marketplace. There is a seller on that marketplace, let's say, who happens to have sent a defective product. The marketplace will take the buyer's complaint, pass it on to the seller, and will require the seller to do the replacement because it's a defective or a damaged product. So the responsibility of redressing a damaged product is that of a seller. That's true on the existing marketplace. That will also be true on ONDC. In the existing marketplace, the marketplace will take that input from the buyer and relate to the seller and have them do the redressal. On ONDC, the buyer application will take that input and pass it on to the seller application and have them do the redressal. So the buyer will always interact with the immediate entity. Let's go to the other unbundled universe we spoke of. It. If you sent money through UPI and it didn't go through, you will not talk to the other application and the other party's bank. You will talk to your own application, not even to your own bank, but your own application. So everybody will raise that with the entity they're interacting with. But participants on the network have an arrangement, they have an understanding, and they also have a contract and a behavioral thing that they have signed as part of their agreement. So if you have a payment issue and you raise it to the payment application, as part of the UPI network, they have responsibilities and they've signed up for certain things and they have to make sure that they solve it for you. Similarly, buyer and seller applications who have signed with ONDC have signed with certain responsibilities, and that's what they will do. So the sequence will be buyer raises to the buyer applications. Depending on what the issue is and who needs to resolve it, they will relay. Now you also asked about delivery. That works, or that can work differently. Because it's an unbundled network, there can be many places where the delivery choice can be made. And let me walk you through 2 or 3 and explain your question in each context. One option can be, I as a buyer, look for a product, I find the seller. After I found the seller, I on ONDC itself find a delivery service, because now I have a pickup location, I have a delivery location. Just as I search for a product, I can also search for a delivery service as a buyer.
So one second, can I hold on there just to dumb this down? Let's say I order an umbrella, right, from your network, from your open network.
Okay.
You're saying I buy it and then I choose the logistics to get it delivered as a customer.
So let me play the scenario out 2-3 ways, and let me complete that, then you will see the difference. So let's play it out one way where, first of all, the sellers of the umbrella are saying, this is the price of my umbrella, this is the color, this is the size, shape, etc. But that's it. I do no delivery. So you have 5 options of umbrella sellers. You select whichever umbrella you like. Now, because all of them are not doing delivery, your buying application first had you find an umbrella seller. Now, after you've chosen the umbrella seller and therefore the seller location is fixed, the same application will help you find delivery providers between these 2 locations. That delivery could be a big company, logistics company, or delivery could also be some boy on a bicycle who's also put his own delivery services on the catalog because it's democratic. Or you could do own pickup. So if the seller allows for own pickup, you could do that. So you'll have multiple choices of pickup. So that's one scenario. Another scenario could be that the seller can say that within a certain radius, I can deliver. So in which case, when you pick one of your 5 sellers, he will say, okay, order noted, make the payment, and in 2 hours, I'll deliver it to your location. That could be another option. Or the seller can have priced it inclusive of delivery, knowing where he typically delivers, and he may have an offline contract with a partner who will do his delivery. So the idea is ONDC is not one model, it's like building blocks. And so depending on what the buyer has requested and depending on what the seller is willing to provide, a different combination can come into play. And at a different point in time, it can be a different combination. So now going back to your earlier question, who's responsible if delivery doesn't happen? So the person who bought the delivery service becomes responsible. So if I was the one who chose the delivery service, let's say I send my own driver to pick up, then the seller is not responsible if my driver loses his way. I'm responsible. Likewise, if the seller had said that I will provide the delivery, I will deliver it to you, then I as a buyer will hold the seller responsible. So depending on who has chosen the delivery service becomes the party responsible for delivery fulfillment.
But let us say that the seller decides to deliver and the delivery doesn't take place, or the goods are damaged.
Right.
My redressal point is who? Which brand is it? That one person who I bought it from who will say I will exchange it or I will refund you the money, or do I go? Is it ONDC? Who is responsible?
So you will raise it with your buyer application, saying that Sonali has received the umbrella, but it is damaged, and call upon the seller to replace it. When the seller put out at the time you were doing the transaction, you would have an option to look at the terms and conditions. So let's say the umbrella seller has said that I will accept returns provided it is immediately on delivery, but not a day later. So that's immediate on delivery, I will accept the return, and I will need a photograph as evidence. So Sonali takes a picture of that broken umbrella, sends it, and if it is indeed broken, the seller is bound to accept that, saying, yes, I will replace this item. So the protocol is that the buyer application serves as the conduit. The terms and conditions at the time of purchase become the guiding terms and conditions. Now, let's say that the seller has said that I will accept if the customer sends a picture. Sonali indeed sends a broken umbrella picture, and the seller says, oh, she must have broken it, I refuse to accept it. If that has not been clarified, right? If all he has said is I need a picture of broken umbrella and you provided one, then as per the transaction terms agreed, he has to honor it. And if he doesn't, then the buyer application will raise it as a dispute on the system. There will be an online dispute resolution mechanism, which will look at what were the terms and conditions. They will identify that the terms and conditions embedded in that transaction were an image of a broken item to be sufficient, and a broken item was provided. Therefore, in this transaction, it is incumbent on the seller to provide the redressal. That becomes the electronic judgment. So that mechanism will ensure that the parties, and it goes purely by what's been signed as a contractual term.
But who's playing jury here? Like, who's making the decision of justice? Like, is the seller wrong? Is the buyer wrong?
Yeah. So initially, and we anticipate and there are many factors that will make the sellers even more responsible on an open network than they might be in a closed platform. So sellers will want to have a good reputation because it is a reputation that makes a buyer buy from an unknown seller. Otherwise, buyers only buy from sellers they already know. So when they buy from an unknown seller, reputation is absolutely key. Even if you're on the most trusted platform, if you see a 2 on 5 rating on 1 on 5 rating on a seller, you will still not buy. So reputation is very, very critical. So most sellers on most occasions will lean forward and make sure that they maintain a good reputation. But if they're completely legally correct, right, then they can legitimately refuse. Now here, a buyer application can also choose to play a role. They can say that, okay, Sonali is a good customer, buys X thousand worth every month. This happens to be an aberrant case. I don't want Sonali and Ati. As the buyer platform, I'm willing to refund it. So not the seller mistake, therefore I'm not asking the seller. I can step in and provide that additional kind of buffering action. So just the way today marketplaces do that sometimes, they will say, don't even send that item back. I will refund it to you because it's a non-returnable item and here's your money back. So buyer applications to maintain good relations with their buyers will step in sometimes. Sellers to maintain a good reputation will do it most of the time. And on the few occasions, there will be an arbitration mechanism which will also provide a judgment. And if after all that somebody refuses, well, then there are consequences, including knocking people off the network eventually.
Why are buyers and sellers incentivized to come onto, ONDC?
There is no incentive. The incentive is the experience you will get. Now, today, again, one of the things we take it for granted is that if I have to buy items for my home, I will go to a certain kind of e-commerce application. If I have to order a cab, I go to a different e-commerce application. If I have to book a flight, I go to a third. If I want to book a hotel room, I go to a fourth. So today, I go to multiple applications because each one specializes in a certain set of products and services. If you want to book a flight, you want to book a hotel room, and you want to book a cab to the airport, you don't have to go to 3 different apps to do it. You can do it in a single app when they're all on ONDC. So you have access to all domains and services. Second, today you have access only to the sellers on the platform you are registered. You don't have access to the entire universe. Now, if you're on the largest platform, you will have access to most of the sellers, but no platform has 100% of the sellers. And no platform can continue to keep adding sellers ad infinitum. But once you have an open network, anybody can add any seller anywhere and that seller becomes visible. It's like the world of websites and browsers. Right? So anybody adds a website anywhere from any browser I can see. It does not require a website to specifically register on a browser for users of that browser to see it. So that universality, now when we begin, obviously we will be very small, but as the network grows, if we cast our minds out 2-3 years out when all categories and all products are present and all sellers and providers are present, this directory of ONDC will be larger than any individual platform. And that will be the reason for people to come. So the uniformity of experience to one app, I can buy everything. I don't have to go to multiple apps or multiple things. And the universality, those will just be the starting points. Once this comes into play, then many more models are possible. Right? Today, what are the models? I order and I get items delivered. So my residence is a location where I can get. I can also order to a third party. I want to gift somebody. So it's not my location, some other location. I enter the address and I deliver. But it's still a fixed location. What if I wanted a moving location? Right? What if I, after I finish my call with Sonali, I have to go to the airport, I realize my mobile charger is missing. I can't now go shopping for it. I have a route from this location to the airport. Can I shop by route? And so now I'm not shopping by either this location or that location. Now the shopping application tells me which are the shops which are close to my route, and I can pick it up on the way. Today, I don't have that option. So because ONDC is building blocks, that depending on the need, different solutions come together. So there will be many, many more use cases. And as people set their minds to it, more and more use cases will come. So that will be the reason that it's not just one kind of shopping, but it will be many kinds of shopping depending on my circumstance.
Shirish, how are you going to convince consumers, lay consumers like me, who are now used to shopping in a particular manner, right? So we have our, these big boys who are currently controlling the e-commerce game. We've been shopping with them for a while. Whether it's food delivery or it's general items or it's grocery or it's, home repairs, all of us have gotten used to it. And we also know that we are going to hold the company responsible if something goes wrong. And because today the customer is king, all redressals are very quick and pain-free for the customer. And the customer is always right. So, and also it's also heavy discounting. One of the things that came up is why people would want to get onto ONDC is because of the fact that this deep discounting model is not going to be sustainable. But as a customer, I mean, if I'm gaining by getting deep discounts, why will I come to your platform at full price?
Agree. So while you're getting discounts, you will not come. Now, today, e-commerce penetration is less than 10%. Less than 10% of commercial activity in the country is passing through e-commerce. 90% plus is not. So what our minds are focused on is how we get that 90%. That 90% is not doing any e-commerce activity today. So the idea is not of a switch, but idea is to facilitate and clear that. The day where the scale of ONDC becomes comparable or larger, that day, even people like you who are hard fans of existing systems will automatically see the benefits. We will not have to convince you. The only way we'll convince you is by succeeding. So that's what we are focused on. We succeed block by block, and as I said, there'll be use cases. So you might do 90% of your activity on your existing e-commerce platform, but you'll discover there are these one or two special use cases. And I gave you a couple of illustrations that these are only possible on ONDC. So you start off by going only for those couple of things to ONDC, and you still retain 98% existing. But little by little, ONDC's multiplicity of models will chip away, and more use cases will come, and it will also hit scale, and it also hits stability of the experience that you're describing. Then there'll be no. Then I'll ask you the reverse question: what is the reason for you to stay on a platform? And you will have none.
Okay. And where are we today in terms of, the progress ONDC is made? Have their pilots been done? What's been the response? What are the teething issues you're facing?
So the pilots are now on in more than 60 cities. We've invited specific users to try it out. And so in this, people are placing orders, people are placing multiple orders. We are looking at what is the promised delivery time, what is the actual delivery time taking place. Now you get a user to cancel a cart. Now does the reverse flow also happen? So we're going through all those steps, and we're going through in multiple locations, multiple kinds of products, some restaurant food, some grocery items. And we're making sure that we're hitting a consistency, exactly the same issues that you were asking me, that we're hitting a consistency that makes for a good experience. When we reach a satisfactory level of that experience, say, okay, now we feel comfortable enough to open it to the public. That's when we'll open it to public. So we are not very far away, but we still have some final rounds of testing to do. When we do that, what we will have at that stage will be a small part of the experience. So what people will see is first they will be able to see neighborhood stores. Today, I can't shop at my neighborhood stores on these big platforms. I get some anonymous stores, and that's the experience. But on ONDC, I'll be able to see my neighborhood stores, my neighborhood restaurants. So that will be one experience. Plus, I can order grocery items, and I can also restaurant food in a single application. So I will see what I'm describing as the multiplicity of domains in a single application. Now, when we begin, I might see only, let's say, 25, 30 Kirana stores, or I might see only 5 or 6 restaurants. So today is not the scale experience, but is the quality of experience. So we want to begin by exposing the quality of experience, getting that early feedback, and keep on refining it till we go. So first step is to test it out. This is a closed user group. That's the stage we are at. And we are on the verge of then declaring that we are now ready for the open public, and we'll begin somewhere. So obviously we won't open all 65 cities in one go, but we'll begin somewhere and expose the public. Based on that initial feedback, then we'll see if we need to refine our workflows or our requirements in some fashion before we expand. So like any other, it will be a step-by-step expansion.
And give me a timeline of this, like as consumers, let's say sitting in Maharashtra, Delhi, Chennai. When will this launch for the public completely?
We don't have a date, it's only so okay. Because we don't have a reference point, as to how long something takes. So this is the first journey anywhere in the world. It's not just for India. Nowhere is there a network of common. So also, it's not like a single company is putting out one product. We are putting out a protocol, but there are other companies who are building buyer-seller applications, providing logistics services, and so it is the resources of all these organizations that have to come in sync. So that's why it's a little hard to predict, but hopefully not very far out in the future.
Okay. Why is the government interested in an initiative like this?
Because first of all, the purpose, right? Who has in there as an incentive at a non-profit level to create a population scale inclusion? population scale inclusion and roll back 2 years, which is when the genesis of the idea came. At the first, when the first wave of pandemic was just beginning to take shape, and across the world, countries didn't know how to contain it. They didn't know how far away the vaccine was. The only solution to contain the virus was to contain movement of people. Till we learn better. Moment to contain movement of people automatically begs the question: how will people access their necessities and supplies? And so that was the genesis, that could we create a digital infrastructure where everybody could access everything through a digital means without having to physically go to a store. So that was the genesis and why the government got interested. Now, if you look at any interoperable system, an interoperable system has to come from outside a profit-motivated private entity. By definition, a private entity will look to maximize its profits and maximize the barriers to entry to that. Whereas the government motive is completely the other way around. They want to create maximum participation, and profit is not the motive. And so this interoperability, which makes scale available to everyone, goes against the principles of investment. If somebody will invest to build scale, now you're making scale available to everyone. So such an action could only have come from a non-profit motivated third party. It happens to be the Indian government that took on this thing, but it could have been any other non-profit entity. But to ensure there is willingness to participate also requires a certain stature. And so the Indian government has that stature, especially coming on the back of many digital infrastructures. So you have population identity with Aadhaar, you have vaccination tracking through COVID, you have digital payments through UPI, you have the GST network. So there's been so many digital infrastructures that have been created. It has the stature to be accepted as a creator of yet another digital infrastructure that can be relied on.
But what about the data protection doubts that consumers will have? I don't want the government to now know what my buying pattern is and who I'm buying and what I'm buying and how much I'm buying. Right. And if this is a government initiative, my antennas would go up. At least with private players, they have my data too, but they're private players. It's not the government. So how are you tackling that concern?
So first of all, we are also private concern. Ondc is a private sector company, created at the behest of the government, but it's a private sector company. And it is operating like a private sector company. Also, from a data standpoint, just the way the network is unbundled, even the data is unbundled. There is no one entity that has all data. Today in a marketplace, the marketplace is actually the entire data. They have all data of all the buyers, they have all data of all the sellers, and they have all data of all the transactions that is taking place in between, including how the payments are getting made and everything. On ONDC, only the buyer apps will have the buyer data, the seller apps will have the seller data. ONDC will have only some overall network metrics, but will not have details of any transaction. And only when there is a confirmed transaction will the relevant buyer's information like name and address be passed on to the seller, because the invoice has to be made and a delivery has to be created. But only that information passes through. The buyer's entire shopping history and their analytics are not passed through to the seller side. So data is compartmentalized. ONDC itself is not keeping any central warehouse of all the data. Whatever we keep will be anonymized and at an aggregate level. And so there is no single repository of data. So if the government wanted Sonali's data, they will have to go to the buyer application on the Sonali's register, and the whatever legal means obtain it from there. ONDC won't have.
I've also heard that also to ensure a more level playing field and also to attract more buyers and sellers onto the platform, your margins are being capped as opposed to, let's say, the players who are currently operating, where people find that a 40% margin being taken by the platform might be a bit much.
Yeah. So our margins to be ONDC's margins. ONDC is right now not charging anything. We are operating on our shareholder funds. Maybe at some time in future we will charge, but it will be a very, very small percentage because we are not in it, as I said, for the profit mode. Now the primary money is being made by the buyer and the seller applications, aside from the seller, of course. Today, the seller applications are, at least for the initial transactions, are charging 3%. Now, market forces will determine where that eventually finishes and where it finishes by category, because we know in the physical world that the margins vary by category. Because of this unbundled nature, there will be many, many seller applications, many, many buyer applications. And because of that competitiveness, we should see a downward pressure on these commissions. Where they land, time will tell, but I would anticipate that they are substantially lower than where the current market is.
But what is your revenue model?
Okay, our revenue model right now, we have shareholders who have infused funds. And we think that those will last us to 2 to 3 years, maybe even 4, depending on where our ongoing cost structure comes. We'll always remain lean. And at some point in time, once we achieve a certain scale and momentum, is when we start charging. We intend to charge, and this is not final, but at least it was proposed to participants initially and had that concurrence that we'll have annual registry maintenance fee. So it's pretty much like if you had a URL domain that you registered, you pay an annual fee to hold that domain. So a registry maintenance fee and a very, very small percentage of the transaction. That should be sufficient because we will not be a high-cost organization. We will be a low-cost organization.
But tell me, Shirish, let's go back to the umbrella example, right? So let's say on this network, I type umbrella. Now, when I do that on Amazon or I do that on Flipkart, there are lots of metrics at play. One is whether if they've paid Amazon, to come up on top. One would be if I can filter through customer reviews, or through brands, specificity, all of that. But there is a pecking order with which the ranking does come. And there are also, deals that are kind of highlighted if the platform believes that this is the best deal. So there's a best deal offer that they themselves highlight. So this is their model of making money too. How will you do it, given that you're not going to be promoting any, seller or buyer or anything of the sort?
Yeah. So we require that when Sonali searches for umbrella, that whichever buyer application she's on must broadcast that request to all sellers of umbrella. They cannot do a selective broadcast. This is digitally auditable. It's part of the network agreement that the buyer application will have signed, and we will audit it. Second is that all the seller applications that identify that, let's say Sonali was looking for a yellow umbrella with stripes with a curved base and a foldable one. So whichever seller have an umbrella that match that description, all those entries, when they come back to the buyer application, that entire list must be displayed to Sonali. That's the second requirement. That's also a part of the network agreement. That's also digitally auditable, and we will audit it. The third thing which you refer to is in which order will they come. We are leaving that to the buyer application. Now, there is a difference between how buyer applications will behave in an open network than they do in a closed network. In an open network, Sonali can search for that same umbrella to 2 different buyer applications. Both those buyer applications will see all the sellers, exactly the same set of sellers and all the sellers. So when Sonali sees a ranking on one application and Sonali sees a ranking on the second application, she knows she's looking at the same universe through 2 different lenses. She can look at the ranking and over a period of time determine which buyer application is presenting an order that is amenable to you and who is interfering with that and presenting that is amenable to them and not to you. Right? So in an open network, because the universe is common, therefore you are in a much stronger position to judge how different buyer applications are doing. In much the same way today, if you go to 2 different browsers and look for a website and you see the outcome, you can judge which browser is providing you good results or not. And you can determine who to say, and you lose nothing because you don't lose anything going from one browser to the other because they're both accessing the same universe of it. And so whoever is providing you the right one, you go there. Now, the browsers also flag off that which is sponsored. So what we also require is wherever there is a commercial consideration, that must be tagged as sponsored. Buyer applications can choose to sell slots, can choose to sell sponsored slots as long as they tag them. So now you as a buyer have an option to see those which are being paid for and then an organic list. And the organic list, if the buyer applications do not do the way Sonali wants, you will change your buyer application with absolutely no downside. Today, you can't change an e-commerce platform with no downside because if you leave a platform you're on, you might wonder if in the next platform you'll have the same number of sellers or not. So today, you do have a downside in mind before you switch a buying platform. But on ONDC, there will be no downside. It's as simple and as easy as deciding whether I switch a browser.
Shirish, I didn't quite understand that completely. But my question is that's a lot of work for me, right? To understand which seller is going to give me a good quality, which seller buyers have had good experience from. If you're going to randomly, give it to me, that's a lot of work for me, right?
So let me break it up into 2 parts. Okay. Yeah. I think the second part of what you're asking is, are there ways by which I can narrow the list? Yes, there will be. So there will be filters, and good buyer applications will give you the filters. So somebody you want by speed of delivery, you want by quality of reputation, you want by price. What are the factors that are important to you? And on that basis, you can then order the seller as per that order.
Right? Okay. So what do you mean by good buyer applications? What do you mean by that? I'm on the open network, right?
Yes, the open network, but you're not directly logging onto the open network. Right? So now I do not know what all applications you are, but let me take some names, not that I specifically mean them. Let's say WhatsApp has become a buying application and you have WhatsApp on your phone. Let's say you are a Vodafone customer and you have the Vodafone app. And let's say you also bank with HDFC, you have an HDFC bank. In 2-3 years from now, all of them will be ONDC compatible. So now you can choose to do your shopping through any one of them. Right? Now, okay, so now when you, let's say, search for a yellow striped umbrella with a bent handle and a foldable through HDFC, you get a certain set of results. You put exactly that search string in your Vodafone application, you get another set of results. Now you be the judge who is providing a list that is to your liking and who's providing the filters. If one of these applications provide no filters and leave you to it, you say too difficult to sort it out, I won't use it. And whoever provides multiple filters, and all good buying applications do it. Right? So today, the shopping applications provide these filters of pricing, brand, rating, etc. If you're buying, let's say, an air ticket on a travel portal, they allow you to filter by morning, evening, non-stop, etc. So every shopping application provides filters that are relevant. And that's what I mean. By if you don't provide the filters, you're creating a horrible user experience. And so good buying applications will provide those filters. And good buying applications will also, based on your history, determine what do I think Sonali is likely to like and order it in that fashion. So that you're more likely to be.
So the onus essentially by what you're saying lies with the buyer application. So yes. Whether HDFC versus Paytm versus WhatsApp, versus the Vodafone app, depending on how they, design that.
Correct, absolutely.
And what's in it for them to do all of this?
Because they get revenue from a new revenue stream that they didn't have before.
So who's paying them that?
It comes out of the buyer, right? So when you buy an item in a regular store, retailer earns some money. Where do they get it from? They get it from the money you paid for the item. So it comes out of the
I see. So we're still in the blueprint stages, right? What are your pilot findings in terms of the issues that you're facing? The seamless experience.
Yeah, so there are no issues in the sense that we normally understand those because this is an invited group. We do see where, for example, the way the protocol has been implemented by applications, there may be some incompatibility. So we resolve that. We look at use cases. There are a couple of additions we've done to the protocol to help build additional experiences. So that's really what we've been doing, and we're making sure that the total experience plays out in the way it is intended.
Okay, last question before I let you go. As people like yourselves and your team and, Mr. Joshi, we're all building this with so much passion. What is your vision for this? And when do you see this big vision of yours actually come to life in its fullest?
It's the mandate we started with, which is democratization. And when anybody who has anything to say, so the first stage, of course, we're talking about Kirana stores who are not digitally present today, but they're still a store. They're still a formal store. Right? Now let's move to the next level. Look at the Thelawala, the Handcart Vendor. He is not a formal store, but he's still a seller. He should also be on ONDC. Now look at the guy who spreads the sheet on the side of the road and puts some pottery that they make at home to sell. That person should also be able to sell on ONDC. And think of somebody who quits their job and becomes a home baker. Today, they only can tell their friends and family to buy from them. But everybody in their neighborhood looking for their bakery products should be able to discover them. So when that last, the smallest of creators or providers is able to as comfortably sell their items to an undiscovered audience as do large players, that's the vision. And that's when we'll truly become democratic and population scale. And we think we'll get there in single-digit years.
Okay, wow. Ambitious plans, a very interesting concept. Going to take us some time to wrap our heads around it. But thank you for taking time and taking us through this whole process and elucidating with examples. I wish you and your team all the very best. And here's more power to the open network and for buyers and sellers to, do a lot more than they're doing now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.